let me say, who is the High Commissioner on National Minorities? I'm not a normal monitoring mechanism that we have in the international community, but a conflict prevention tool. The institution was actually established roughly 20 years ago when Sweden and Carl Bildt was heading. He was very instrumental when Sweden was one of the first presidencies of the OSCE. And I might say that that country has been one of the big supporters of my institutions since then. When we think about the High Commissioner on National Minorities, it's also born out of the feelings, the insights of the early 90s, which here was made reference to earlier on. We cannot change borders, let's make them less important. Also, that the responsibility for the different groups, the communities, the minorities, is in the country where the minority lives. This is the essence of international standards. This is the essence of the so-called Bolzano-Boson recommendations that one of my predecessors has issued. There are on my website, you can find them. There are also some samples of them in different languages here at the stand. This is the essence of minority rights. May I say that I think in some parts of Europe, we have also in EU states, we have retracted from that notion, really that it is up for the country where the minority lives to uphold its rights. Minority rights were a very big part of the so-called Copenhagen criteria when 10 new member states became part of EU. Has it been as much at the forefront when Eastern Partnership, when visa liberalization dialogues have been made? Has it been as much? I think some other rights have been more at the forefront than compared to the linguistic and other minority rights that there are here. Furthermore, I think one thing is very, very important when we are talking about different communities. It's the right to self-identification. I hope that we will respect it here also in the Ukrainian situation and for not take, let's say, our preset models from Western Balkans, from any other country. Because the situation in Ukraine is different. We have smaller minorities, we have different communities, we have people who feel they are Ukrainian but speak Russian. And we have people who feel more Russian. Everybody must be able to determine their own identity. This is also one of the important liberties we have at stake. Dear friends, I have spent now the past weeks more time in Ukraine than I have spent in my native Finland. I think this is the 4th visit to the country, and I have been in the possibility to meet with different groups of students, local councillors, trade union representatives, etc., etc. And one thing which is totally outside the mandate of the High Commissioner, but I will want to mention it because it is important, the decentralization. There has been, I think, as I've heard, many, many times, and presidential candidates in earlier times have promised decentralization, but it has not come about. And what is important is that you have a decentralization, because that is also the precondition for a democratic society, a broad democratic society, but also a broad democratic society where national minorities can thrive and can live in peace. So I have been able to get acquainted with your country. I have made some of my remarks made public in statements. That is not that usual for a mechanism as mine, being more out of the public eye, not being a monitoring mechanism. But I think it has been important because there has been some misinformation. And one thing that needs to also get passed here today is that legally nothing has changed after February as regards minorities, language law. The old language law remains in place in spite of the Verkhovna Rada trying to abolish it, but the president used his powers not so that the law stayed in place. Nothing has changed, not for the better, not for the worse. We could say that there is a need to improve situation for national minorities. This is something that the Council of Europe and my institution has been asking for very, very long time. The structures at the central level were abolished. The law on national minorities is not at all reflecting the reality. Here I hear good words that the government is planning to do reforms to strengthen the structures at central level, to make participation for minorities meaningful. That is good. And then one message I also try to make come across everywhere where I am about in the Ukrainian society. Please take time when you now think of what kind of inclusive language legislation that you need. Don't make any hasty decisions. The old law is in force. Let it be that situation. Now evaluate what is the real situation. How has the language law functioned? Take time. Do not make hasty decisions. That is my message, and I hope it has been understood. I hope it has been understood, and understand also that you have more urgent matters on the agenda in your country. Take time. There are some people, I think, who still believe that they need to go swiftly ahead. The main political forces do not be that. Dear friends, I think many of us would have looked much forward to meet Mr. Dzhemilev today. And it is a disappointment that he is not here. And may I say, I also had very much looked forward to meeting him. He is such a personality who demands respect. Because more than 20 years, the Ukrainian society has ignored the needs of the Ukrainian people. And no matter what has been the regime, improvements did not come about. You did not get the position, they did not get the position of indigenous people. Now the Verkhovna Rada has made a decision that they would want to adhere to the ILO Convention 169, recognize Crimean Tatars as indigenous people. For more than 20 years, their needs were ignored. But still the Crimean Tatars have been working very hard for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And many of them did, the big majority, did not participate in the so-called referendum. My institution has been deeply engaged in their situation. We published last August a so-called needs assessment of the formerly deported people from Crimea. The deported people in May 1944 were the majority were Crimean Tatars. There were other groups as well that were deported from Crimea, but the majority were there. And this assessment proves that there are many questions that have not been solved, and we don't know how to make them solved. I would have also liked to hear other Crimean representatives today, but unfortunately they are not here. I think one of the reasons is that today in Simferopol they are discussing a so-called new constitution for Crimea, and it seems that there will be a new political system, let's say representation, that in the Crimean parliament will not guarantee representation of the Crimean Tatars, nor the autonomy that they have been looking for. So I hope also that you will have an understanding for the needs of people moving between Crimea and mainland Ukraine. That the laws that will be accepted will not make the life of ordinary people harder. And I hope that the generosity that so many people have shown to people coming from Crimea will continue in mainland Ukraine. Let's not forget their situation. And let's not forget the situation either of those who feel themselves as Ukrainians and are living in Crimea, because also they are in certain situations, their human rights and minority rights must be respected.